Namaskar students. Today we are moving to the lecture 33, the English lecture. We are still in the scientific school. We are trying to understand what is the role of the scientific school, especially systems theory, game theory, and decision-making theory to the understanding of IR theory. So in this lecture, we are posing a question on what is a system, what is a structure, and an agent, and how are they related to international relations theory. What is a system and a structure? Models of international system in which patterns of interaction are specifically pointed, the processes by which decision makers in one national unit interacting with the other and responding to units from domestic and international environment formulate foreign policy, although as Raymond Tanter has suggested, international system approaches may suggest decision-making models. What both have in common, however, is the fact that a system construct can be used to examine how foreign policies are formulated and how states or other units interact and relate to each other. Interaction between a national political system and its domestic subsystems such as public opinion, interest groups, and culture to analyze patterns of interaction. External linkage groups, that is, other political systems, actors, or structures in the international system with which the national system under examination has direct relations. The interaction between external linkages groups and those internal groups, mostly that respond to external events such as foreign affairs elites, the military, and the business people engaged in world trade. Two fundamental approaches theorizing based on the systems theory. One, we have seen that it is focused on actors and the interaction that takes place among them, whether they are individuals, groups of people, such as leaders or bureaucratic units. This approach has been termed as reductionist because it is at the level of individual participants or units, for example, nation states, than the international system. Two, places emphasis on structures that provide the framework within which the interaction occurs. Structure is said to have a decisive impact on the interaction of the actors. According to structural theory, the actions of individuals or groups, when aggregated, produce patterns of behavior that may be fundamentally different from the behavior patterns that would exist if the individual actor was part of other structures. Holistic or systemic, the structural approach attempts to explain how the processes within which actors exist or structures within which they exist affect the interactions between the actors and how and why in the structure changes in the structure take place. Now, structuralism and structuration. John Gerald Ruggie. The study of change is necessarily and by definition the study of structure. It is structure that establishes interactive patterns which change as the structure changes. Structuralism, which assumes the existence of structures that are permanent and immutable. Thus, the structure that shapes the international interactive patterns is immanent, although its characteristic features, including the number of actors and the distribution of capabilities, change from time to time. Structures provide the framework within which the actors or agents respond and relate to one another. Within such structures, systems are groups of actors that are interacting with each other. how the actors relate to each other, and the relationship between the structure and the actors, and the structure-agency relationship forms a critically important part of the quest to an understanding of the change at the systemic and holistic level. Now, what is a structuralist ontology? Alexander Wendt and Raymond Duval describe the relationship between structures and agents as one of codetermined irreducibility. The system of interaction among agents are made possible by the structure in which they exist. Interactions among agents shape the structure, which in turn has an impact on the interactions. Anthony Giddens maintains that neither the subject, that is human agent, or the object, that is society or social institutions, is inevitably more important than others in shaping the social practices of behavior. Agents shape society, and society also shapes the behavior of agents in an interactive set of patterns. All rules are inherently transformational. Duality of structure and system. For example, farm bills today are thought to be transformational, of taking or giving freedom of choice to the farmer, which is something that many of our agricultural unions have been asking, farmers unions, especially the Shetkari Sangatana in Maharashtra, which was led by the legendary Sharad Joshi. He did it quite long ago, where he said, please don't tie the hands of the farmers behind through subsidies. He thought subsidies were very negative. It did not allow the farmer to progress. And when today the bills have come up, you have seen the politicization that is breathing. So all these things are transformational. Duality of structure and system. Agents operate within structures. In doing so, they relate in some fashion to each other, so as to produce recurrent behavioral patterns or interaction, thus constituting a system. Other uses of system. Systems analysis is really a set of techniques for systems analysis that facilitates the organizing of data. But while the processes, while they possess no ideal or theoretical goals, by contrast, systems theory subsumes an integrated set of concepts, hypotheses, and propositions, which theoretically are widely applicable across the spectrum of human knowledge. A whole which functions as a whole by virtue of the interdependence of its parts is called a system. And the method which aims at discovering how this is brought about in the widest variety of systems has been called the general systems theory. This has been defined by Anatole Rappaport, whom we have already done in the earlier lectures. Connotes relationships between units. The units of a system are the same set, by which is meant that they have features common that enable a particular relationship, like the nervous system or the balance of our system. Now, what are the features of a system? It may be loosely or tightly organized, stable or unstable. A stable system is an input of considerable power to upset it. An unstable system is very precarious, and its balance or equilibrium is more easily disturbed. A stable system is capable of absorbing new components and processing a variety of inputs while continuing to function normally, adjusting to changes and correcting its behavior by making appropriate reactions to negative feedback, that is, information that is deviating from the course. Smaller systems or subsystems may exist within larger systems, whereas the subsystem is a system in itself that can be isolated. A system level refers to complex relationships comprising all units at that level. Systems have different features at different levels. Every system has boundaries that distinguish it from its operating environment. Every system is a communications net that permits the flow of information, leading to a self-adjusting process. Every system has inputs and outputs. An output of a system may re-enter that system as an input, though what is termed as feedback. Systems represent the interactive patterns among the units within a structure. Interdependence, used to characterize relationships in global international system, result of interaction among components of a system. The greater the level of interdependence among states people, greater is likely to be the loss of control that they experience over all or a part of the decision-making independence. According to Robert Keohane and Joseph Nye, interdependence always carries with it costs, since interdependence restricts autonomy. But it is impossible to specify a priori whether the benefits of a relationship will exceed costs. This will depend on the values of the actors as well as on the nature of the relationship. Interdependence has two dimensions: sensitivity and vulnerability. Sensitivity involves degrees of responsiveness within a policy framework. How quickly do changes in one country bring mostly changes in another? And how great are the costs? How great are the costly effects? Vulnerability as an actor's liability to suffer costs imposed by the external actors even after policies have been altered. Interdependence. Again, we're going on this issue because this has been one of the major issues of the systems theory. Not symmetrical and interdependent relationship between partners are not equal is likely to be characterized either by dependence as need or by asymmetry, which refers to a situation in which the needs, the benefits derived from the relationship are more than the whole. The greater the level of interdependence, the greater the amount of interaction. Systems are hypothesized as patterns of interactions. As the level of interdependence and the amount of interaction grow, the complexity of the system increases. Problems, inputs in the international system are multiplying faster than solutions can be found, thus leading to systems overload. Patterns of interdependence and interaction now more complex as a result of the pervasive impact of technology on the international system. The structural requisites, those needs that must be satisfied for a system to function effectively, become more numerous. Interdependence does not only breed crisis and various forms of linkage, it also increases the potential for any single party to manipulate a crisis for its own domestic or foreign policy ends. James Rosenev and Systems, Cascading Interdependence and Post-International Politics. Cascading interdependence based on rapidly changing patterns of interaction among such phenomena as resource scarcities, subgroupism, the effectiveness of governments, transnationalism, and the aptitudes of the public. It is characterized of the expanding interdependence and fragmentation of a decentralizing world that Rosenev called post-international politics. It may evolve in either chaotic or coherent patterns. The rise of political consciousness and assertiveness of previously quiescent groups and their coalitions, the extensive impact of technology in such forms as the information and communications revolution, the widening availability or diffusion of technologies of war or peace, and the widening and deepening of economic and other forms of transactions, resulting both in conflictual and cooperative solutions. The interlocking tensions that, being interlocked, derive strength and direction from each other and cascade throughout the global system. Now, what is cascading interdependence? The rise of subgroups in a fragmenting world means that the individuals have been transferred from a larger to a smaller entity, consequently weakening the authority of the established nation state. The effect to distribute power in an erratic fashion among state entities and numerous subsystems at many levels. Role conflicts reflected in the values, capabilities, and histories that differentiate the various systems in which policy-making position is situated. The existence of open systems subject to inputs based on recurrent phenomena, the cumulative effect of which is to yield patterns of disorder. Global turbulence, the proliferation of actors, the bifurcation of world politics into state-centered and multi-centric worlds, the impact of technologies, the globalization of national economies, heightening levels of dependence, the weakening of authority within states, the rise of newly powered subgroups, and a widening gulf between the developed and the developing worlds. Global order interactive patterns, three basic levels. The ideational or intersubjective level is based on what people perceive to be the ordering of the world. Or the constructivist reference, how the world is socially constructed in the minds of those who comprise its agents or actors. We'll be also doing social constructivism, which is a major contemporary debate in international relations. 2, the behavioral level. Sustaining the global order exists at the behavioral level. What people actually do on a regular basis to maintain existing global arrangements based on their ideational understandings or perceptions. This may include negotiations, instances of resorting to war, threats to enemies, and promises to allies. 3, the institutional level, which consists of the institutions and regimes within or through which states and other actors act in keeping with their ideational and behavioral expressions. All these three levels are as an interactive set of dynamics producing change in the global system. And these can be present without government, just as government can exist without governance. Kenneth Boulding and systems complexity. Kenneth Boulding tells us that systems are characterized by greater or lesser levels of complexity. Classified systems according to levels of increasing complexity: mechanical, homeostatic, biological, equivalent to higher animals and humans. The process of gathering, selecting, and using information essential to preservation is far more complex in the human system than in a simple mechanical system. A thermostat reacts only to changes in temperature and ignores other data. Humans have a capacity for self-knowledge, which makes possible the selection of information based on a particular cognitive structure or mental representation as a basis for decision-making. The mental representation, called an image, can furnish the framework for restructuring stimulus information for something fundamentally different from the information itself. The resulting human behavior is a response not to a specific stimulus, but to knowledge structure, affecting a comprehensive view of the environment. Social and political systems are structured from the images of participant human actors, folk knowledge to the collective images of the members of the political systems. The idea of image crucial in understanding systems and in studying such political phenomena as conflict and decision making. The other major sociologist who has greatly influenced our scientific school is Talcott Parsons, a sociologist born on 13 December 1902, 8 May 1979, Talcott Parsons, the classical tradition, best known for his social action theory and structural functionalism. Parsons is considered as one of the most influential figures in sociology in the 20th century. His is what is called the AGIL model for all living systems. A is for adaptation, G is for goal attainment, I is for integration, L is for latency, that is pattern maintenance. The social system levels are economic system, money, political system, political power, and then the class, social community influence, and the cultural tradition, that is value commitment. Talcott Parsons told us that the action system places people both in the role of subjects and in the role of the subject alter and object ego, which interact with the system. If actors gain satisfaction, develop a vested interest in the preservation and functioning of the system. Mutual acceptance of the system by the actors creates an equilibrating mechanism in the system. Three systems: the personality system, the social system, and the cultural system. These subsystems are interconnected within the action system so that each affects the other. He conceived of society as an interlocking network of action systems. A change in one subsystem affects the other subsystem and the whole action system. He attached great importance to equilibrium as a means of measuring fluctuations in the ability of a social system to cope with problems that affect its structure. Equilibrium may be an ordered process of change, a process following a determinate pattern rather than the random variety relative to the starting point. Social systems are characterized by multiple equilibrium processes because social systems have subsystems, each of which must remain in equilibrium if the larger system is to maintain equilibrium. Maintenance of equilibrium and four functional conditions. Pattern maintenance, or the ability of the system to ensure the reproduction of its basic patterns, values, and norms. You have after that goal attainment of the capacity of the system to achieve whatever goals the system has accepted as set for itself. Integration of the different functions and subsystems into a cohesive, coordinated whole. Social systems serve the function of pattern maintenance. Adaptation occurs in the economy and the area of scientific and technological knowledge. The polity, the government in particular, performs the function of goal attainment. The integrative function is fulfilled by the cultural subsystems, which include mass communication, religion, and education. The formulation of common values that cut across national boundaries is essential to international order. He called for the differentiation of interests among people in a pluralistic fashion so that they will cut across historical lines of partisan differentiation. Such pluralistic differentiation of the international world would enhance the prospects for international stability. Now, David Easton and others. Several political scientists have developed, adapted, and elaborated systems theory. Political system as defined by Gabriel Almond, that a system of interactions to be found in all independent systems which perform the functions of integration and adaptation by means of the employment or the threat of employment or of more or less legitimate physical compulsion. System is characterized by transactions and communications. Like Carl Duche, we did him. He was concerned with the extent to which political systems are equipped with adequate facilities of collecting external and internal information to the points of decision makers. The political systems that survive stress can receive screen time, transit, and evaluate information. Systems theory is based on the idea of political life as a boundary maintaining set of interactions embedded in or surrounded by other social systems that constantly influence it. Now, political system input-output analysis. An interest in the means or by which the system convenes and puts it into inputs. The principal inputs into the political system demands and supports, whereas the major inputs are the decisions allocating systems and allocating system benefits. Almond on the question of how political systems engage in A, political socialization, B, interest articulation, and 3, aggregation, and 3, political communication. Such factors represent what is meant for making demands on the political system. They are aware of the input functions. Almond was concerned particularly with one, political output and functions involving A, rule making, rule application, and rule adjudication. The capacity of authoritatively allocating values. Rule making, legislature; rule application, judiciary; and rule application, the executive; and rule adjudication, the judiciary. What is a structural functional analysis? It builds on the early 20th century work of anthropologists of Bronislaw Malinowski and A.R. Radcliffe Brown, then Robert K. Merton's work in sociology. Assumptions: 1, to specify a pattern of behavior that satisfies functional requirement of the system, and to identify functional equivalence in different structural units. A structural requisite is a pattern or observable uniformity of action necessary for the continued existence of the system. A functional requisite is generalized condition given the level of generalization of the definition and the unit's general setting. Bureau functions are those observed consequences which wait for the adaptation or adjustment of the system. Such functions relate to the system's goals, to the system's maintaining, and to system's ability to interact with and to adapt to change. Provides at a minimum a classificatory scheme for examining political phenomena. Systems at the international level. Morton A. Kaplan suggests the existence of a system of action that he defines as a set of variables as related in contradistinction to its environment, that describable behavior regularities characterized the internal relationship of the variables to each other and the external relationships of the set of individual variables to combinations of external variables. Systems theory is said to provide a basis for the examination of linkages, which are recurrent sequences of behavior that originate from in one system and are reacted to in another system. International systems contain patterns of action and interaction among collectivities and among individuals acting on their behalf. A system comprises disturbance inputs, a regulator that undergoes changes as a result of disturbing influence and environmental constraints that translate the state of the disturbance and the state of the regulator into a stable and unstable outcomes. What are the characteristics? Each has an interest in those factors that contribute to stability or instability in the international system. There is a common concern with the adaptive controls by which the system remains in equilibrium or a steady state. Homeostasis in living organisms. Homeostasis means every human being has a certain level that is called your normal temperature. See, even when you get sick, what is the first thing that the doctor does to you? The doctor tells you, let's bring back your temperature to normal, which seems to be the most important. Most of you understand it in COVID. In COVID, one of the things is your temperature, body temperature should come back to normal. That means your organs do not have any sort of infection and your immunity system is working. So it's the same when we talk of systems theory. When there is a shared interest in assessing the impact on the system of the existence of units with a greater or a lesser ability to mobilize resources and to use advanced technology. There is a consensus among writers that domestic forces within the national political units exert a major effect on the international system. They are concerned as part of their interest in the nature of stability with the capacity of the international system to deal with the disturbances within it. This leads to a shared interest in the role of national and supranational actors as regulators in an international system that is characterized by dynamic change. Principles of cybernetics, Norbert Wiener and Carl Jussier. The organization and interaction patterns of complexes, elements hypothesized or observed to exist as a system. The relationship and boundaries between a system and its entities, and in particular, the nature and impact of inputs from the output to the environment. The functions performed by systems, the structures for the performance of such situations, and their effect on the stability of the system. The homeostatic mechanism available to the system for the maintenance of steady state or equilibrium. The classification of systems as open or closed, as an organismic or non-organismic systems. The structuring of hierarchical levels of systems, the location of subsystems within the system, and the patterns of interaction both among the systems and between the subsystems and the system itself. Regions have been treated as subsystems in the international system. Theories of polarity and international stability. Polarity refers to the number of actors and distributions of and among them, and thus connotes the structure of the system. A lot of debate about the relationship between the distribution and stability. International systems containing two poles bipolarity, more or less prone to war than international systems containing a large number of actors with power, more widely distributed multipolarity. Duché and Singer contended that as the system moves away from bipolarity towards multipolarity, the frequency and intensity of war should be expected to diminish. They assumed that coalitions of blocs of nations reduce the freedom of alliance members to interact with outside countries. The greater the number of actors who are not alliance members, the greater the number of possible partners for interaction in the international system. Since the disintegration of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, the prospect of a global nuclear war has greatly diminished. While the number of low-intensity armed conflicts has arisen, this encompasses ethno-religious wars, the breakup of additional states, and the emergence of violent sub-state and non-state actors. Duché and Singer, they set forth an alternative model in which interaction among nations is as competitive as it is cooperative. They suggest that the more limited possibility for interaction, the greater the potential for instability. Assume that the international system is but a special case of the pluralism model, namely, that one of the greatest threats to the stability of any impersonal social system is a shortage of alternative partners, multiplied by issues conflicting cooperative among many actors, the result of cross-cutting interests and loyalties that must be taken into account by any one actor in deciding to engage in war against any other actor. Multipolarity is said to reduce the prospects for an arms race because a country is likely to respond only to that part of the increase in armament spending by the rival power that appears to be directed towards it rather than toward the two other powerful countries. Set forth as an alternative model in which interaction among nations is as likely to be competitive as well as cooperative. Polarity is also measured by the extent of states to form alliances and coalitions. Both the poles and the level of power concentration among the polar states form an important determinant of whether war will break out. System structure and stability. Young proposes a model in which the existence of such disconnections are emphasized. His model is designed to generate useful insights, the variety and complexity and interpenetration of the subsystems and trade-offs and possibilities of manipulation across subsystems. The relationships between various subsystems and global patterns of international politics. Unipolarity is both peaceful and durable. That's what William Wolfert tells us. Unipolarity is defined as a structure in which the capabilities of the unipolar state are so great that no other combination of states can balance them. Something after the post-Cold War, which world where America is thought to have come back. But with this 2020 elections, there is a lot of doubt whether really America can withstand a lot of these things. The fact remains that US possesses such great margin of power that no other state is in a position to challenge it for hegemonic leadership. Precisely because of the vast imbalance that favors the US, the international system will probably remain peaceful, or at least there will be no global cataclysmic, such as many feared during the Cold War. This means that major conflicts arise from the ability and willingness of aspirant states to challenge militarily the preponderant position of the unipolar state. Durability of unipolarity, many factors. The willingness of the unipolar state to sustain its position, belief that its power makes the unipolar state largely an imminent to external threats. At the same time, the unipolar state may seek to preserve its status on the cheap and becoming the grand global broker of deals for which others pay. A symmetrical strategy by which a smaller power would attempt to defeat the US by striking against its perceived vulnerabilities. That is its information infrastructure. And that is what has happened in the present elections of 2020. The question is coming on the machines being made in China, the algorithm being made in Serbia, and the counting of votes in Venezuela. Nothing has been done by the US or by the American people themselves. So the question counts whether voters count or algorithms count. Stability connotes the absence of major war between the major states in the system and encompasses the absence of major threats to global peace. Regional subsystems are in the international system. So many, if you see the systems deviated for pattern variables. The nature and level of cohesion or the degree or similarity and complementarity in the properties of the political entities being considered and the degree of interaction between these units. 2, the nature of communication within the region. The level of power in the subsystem, with power defined as the present or potential ability and the willingness of one nation to alter internal decision-making process of other countries in accordance with its own policies. And third, 4, the structure of relations within the region. That's what, if you see all this, you will come to know that regional organizations also succeed or fail because of these 4 factors. Take SARC, or South Asian Association of Regional Organizations. You see clearly that all the 4 factors are totally absent. And that is why many say that SARC is in its infantile paralysis stage. So regional subsystems need not be geographical regions. Rather, the subsystems consist of the interactions of national elites, not the physical entities or political units of which interactions are observed to have been more or less regional boundaries. Necessary and sufficient conditions for a regional subsystem includes regularity and intensity of interaction so that a change in one part affects other parts. General proximity of actors, internal and external recognition of the subsystem as distinctive and the provision of at least two and probably more actors in the subsystem. So if you see clearly, the world systems analysis is what it represents, an attempt to assess the relationship of structure and process in contemporary and historical context and intellectual reaction to what have been deemed to be excessively abstract or historical social science models. History is deemed to be a vital ingredient, not merely as a basis for descriptive narrative, not the principal goal of the proponents of the world systems theory, but instead as a crucially important means of discerning and comparing repetitive phenomena. Behavior within the system can be best explained in terms of world system structure and its critical processes. Theorists post that rhythms and cycles in the process of the system can be identified and examined. George Modelinsky came out with this model of cycles of world leadership. Such phenomena represent a regular imbalance in the world. It is the age of exploration. He suggests that there are periods of global leadership under the maritime security being accompanied by international stability. Based on sea power, a succession of leading states came into existence, like Great Britain, the Dutch, and many of the European powers. Leading world states have shown a remarkable capability to forge mechanisms or alliances and coalitions for collaborative behavior with various forms of balance of power. Balance of power, leading states pursued strategies designed to preserve or restore stability, characterized by its tendency towards fragmentation, along with greater competition among major powers in a system of heightened complexity. The level of concentration of power, political, military, and economic, shapes the structure of the system. The international system is divided into two tiers. The major powers are dominant state and the lesser of greater powers. Those who are satisfied with the status quo and those who seek change, the existing distribution of power. The erosion of the position of the dominant power, part of the cyclical evolution, leads dissatisfied actors to threaten or actually to resort to using force to effect changes in their favor. So if you have seen clearly, we have now seen where there is a way to, in international relations, we have used these scientific engineering theories that have come from the scientific school to explain social factors and here political factors and foreign policy factors. Thank you. When we go into the next lecture, we will deal with the next topic. Thank you so much.